to Sugar Coated. I'm your host, Adrienne Garland, the CEO and founder of She Leads Media. For far too long, women have been conditioned to sugarcoat their words, their actions, and the way they show up in the world, and to conform to certain cultural norms and ideals. This is inherently designed to keep those who are outside of the norm from gaining power, prestige, wealth, and influence, preventing more women from being recognized and respected as the powerful leaders that we truly are. Join me each week as we dive into raw conversations with remarkable, uncompromising, and inspirational women that will encourage you to strip away your sugarcoating and move boldly in the direction of your magnificent dreams. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to Sugar Coated. This is episode number 3 in our summer series. And I just want to let you know that we have a little work going on in our house. They're cutting some stone. So if you hear some background noise that sounds like a saw, that is what is happening. I didn't want to hold off on recording this episode because I felt like it was so important. And I thought, the people are out front working and we are here working too. So hopefully that background sawing will just motivate you that, we are all working toward building something great. So welcome to another episode of the Sugar Coated podcast, where I have real conversations with women entrepreneurs and leaders on a regular basis. This summer, I also have decided to do some solo episodes as it is pushing me a little bit outside of my comfort zone to do some solo episodes and sharing with you some of my expertise. So I'm your host, Adrienne Garland. Hello. And today I'm going to speak about a topic that is super close to me and to my heart, and that is the transformative power of podcasting. Not just in general, but for women entrepreneurs. And that is from both a host and a guest perspective. So if you're not participating in podcasting as a woman business owner, I say you're missing out on a golden opportunity to reach a bigger and more valuable audience. As the CEO of She Leads Media, I've had the privilege of witnessing firsthand how podcasting has catapulted businesses to new heights. So let's dive deeper into why podcasting is such a game changer for women entrepreneurs. One of the most incredible aspects of podcasting is how it fosters authentic connections with your audience. By hosting your own show, you have the opportunity to share your unique perspective, personal stories, and expertise. This genuine connection builds trust and loyalty with your listeners, and we all know that trust is the foundation for any successful business relationship. In my opinion, there's not another medium that's as intimate as podcasting. I mean, you're literally in someone else's ear. Who among us hasn't felt like we actually know the hosts that we listen to the most? Listening in to someone who is genuinely interested in helping you, inspiring you, or entertaining you week after week builds intimacy. In fact, I just taught a CRM and loyalty class at NYU, Tisch Center for Hospitality, where I'm an adjunct instructor. And the word that we all agreed upon that characterizes customer relationship management and loyalty the most, especially in hospitality, tourism, and events management, is far and away the word trust. But it doesn't stop there. Being a guest on other people's podcasts, OPP. If anybody's from the 90s like I am, you know exactly what rap song I'm talking about. This is the new OPP. So being a guest on other people's podcasts, OPP, can be equally as powerful. As a guest, you're able to tap into established audiences, reaching people who might not otherwise have heard of you. It's like getting a backstage pass to someone else's community, and that exposure can drive significant traffic to your business, especially if leveraged correctly. Some people go on podcasts and then fail to promote their appearance, and they fail to use the content from that show on their own platforms. So they miss out on the potential to start or continue conversations. So if you do get invited on someone else's podcast as a guest, follow this advice and take the following steps to make the most of your appearance. First, do your research. Research podcasts in your niche. Identify podcasts that align with your expertise and target audience, and look for the shows that have engaged audiences and that are a good fit for your brand. Then you want to reach out to the host. First you want to see if these shows even accept guests at all. And if they do, reach out to the host, but in a personalized way. Craft a personalized and compelling pitch to the host and highlight your expertise, but do it with the value that you can bring to their audience, right? Make it more about them and what you can do to add value rather than all about you. No one wants to hear a pitch that says how great you are and that, you'd be a great guest for the show. You really need to do some research here, listen in to a couple of shows and really pull out what you believe to be the most interesting aspect of the show and make sure to give the host a compliment on that or ask an intriguing question. Make sure to also be respectful of the host's time and be prepared to provide any necessary information, materials, headshots, etc. that the host asks you for. Now, before you go on the show, because you've written such an incredible pitch note to the host, make sure to prepare and rehearse. And what I mean by that is make sure that you have your setup properly set up, that you understand what to do if there's any type of technical glitch. And if you can, make sure that you have a headset, if you have a professional microphone, make sure that you know exactly how to use all of that so that you can really be the best guest possible. So prepare for the interview by brainstorming key points that you want to speak about and anecdotes that are related to your expertise. Rehearse your responses to potential questions to ensure that you deliver a clear and concise message. Now, you want to prepare, but also make sure that you are authentic and engaging. So during the interview, make sure that you are yourself. Right? Don't try to be someone else. Speak passionately about your area of expertise and be sure to engage with the host and the audience of the podcast by sharing personal anecdotes and practical insights that the audience can take away. When all of this is done and the episode is recorded, make sure that you provide the show with a 5-star written review. After it's over, show your appreciation to the host, even if they don't ask you to do this, by providing a 5-star review for their podcast on popular podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts. Now, Apple Podcasts lets you actually write a written review, and that really helps these shows to surface in the search. Other platforms like Spotify only allow you to give a 5-star review, but you can only do so after you have listened to a couple of episodes of that show. So on any of the platforms that you listen to, make sure that you give that rating if you can. And even more importantly, go on over to Apple Podcasts and give that host a 5-star written review. Not just about your appearance on the show, but about the show in general. That is such a kind thing that you can do in exchange for having been invited to be a guest on their show. That gesture helps to support the host, and it also helps to strengthen a relationship that you've just built. Now, once the episode comes out, you want to make sure that you promote it across all of your own platforms. So all of your social media profiles, in your email newsletter, if you have one, on your website. Encourage your audience to listen and to engage with the episode and to ask you questions about that episode. And if you have a podcast of your own, you could also suggest doing a podcast swap and interviewing the host on your show. You can also talk on your podcast about what it was like to be a guest on that show as well. You also want to repurpose the content, right? So this conversation that you've had with your podcast host is probably a half an hour long at the very least. There is a wealth of content that is included in that 30 minutes that you can repurpose. You can transform that interview into other content formats to extend its reach. Things like creating a blog post, pulling out quotes that you can use on social media, or you might even do a short video clip or reel that highlights the key takeaways from that interview. This repurposing allows you to cater to different audience preferences and maximize exposure, right? Why go on a show to gain visibility and then do nothing with it? You also have just spent 30 minutes in a very intimate format with the podcast host. You have established a relationship, and oftentimes podcast hosts speak to you in advance. So this might be the second interaction that you're having with the podcast host. And so what you want to do is, if you have a good rapport with that person, you want to cultivate that relationship. It's not often that we get to meet and speak to people one-on-one like that for such a lengthy period of time. So you want to stay in touch with that podcast host and show your gratitude for the opportunity. Nurture that relationship, because there may be a future potential collaboration that you can work together with somebody, and also other networking opportunities. That host probably has a whole other network that you can tap into. And if you can build, deepen, and cultivate that relationship, you've just gained access to a network that you may not have otherwise have had access to. Incredible, right? And then make sure that after everything is said and done, that you are monitoring the impact of your guest appearance. So you want to really be looking out, are people sharing what you're talking about? Are they sharing insights? Are they forwarding on your content? Are you being asked to be a guest on other shows, right? Look at your website traffic, check out your social media engagement, and see if your audience or newsletter list is growing. When you assess the success of that episode, you can use the insights to inform future podcast guest appearances. And this is a place where you can do some testing on what it is that you talk about, how you talk about things, and really see what type of just credibility and what type of things are being shared so that you can really refine what it is that you are talking about. So, in totality, by following these expert tips given by me, you can leverage your guest appearance on podcasts so that you build credibility, connect with new audiences, and ultimately grow your business and your brand. Being strategic and genuine in interactions with podcast hosts and audiences can lead to a mutually beneficial relationship that goes way beyond a single episode appearance. Now, let's talk numbers about podcasting. According to a study by Nielsen, women-led podcasts have been proven to generate more revenue when compared to their male-led counterparts. And women are proactively seeking out more women's voices. So now we're talking about podcast listening. According to the Women's Podcast Report from Edison Research and SXM Media, over half of women podcast listeners in the US say they would listen to more podcasts if there were more that were focused on female stories and perspectives or were hosted by women. Now, if that's not reason alone for the women entrepreneurs among us to start a podcast, I don't know what is. Take, for instance, someone like Jenna Kutcher. I don't know how many of you listen to her podcast, the Gold Digger podcast, but she is incredible. Jenna started out as a photographer using, I believe, like a $300 camera, and an educator who has leveraged her podcast to share business and marketing tips And it has led to exponential growth of her education platform and brand collaboration. Her the most recent I could find, top line revenue now exceeds $5 million, and that was in 2019. So I'm sure that she has crossed the $7 million mark. And that's not an easy feat because the majority of women entrepreneurs don't even make it past the $1 million mark. So you could see how Jenna Kutcher has leveraged podcasting in order to really grow her business and increase her revenue exponentially. Then there's Patrice Washington, host of Redefining Wealth with Patrice Washington. Patrice is a personal finance expert and author who uses her podcast to inspire women to redefine wealth beyond money and focuses in on holistic well-being. Her podcast has led to her being invited to other speaking engagements. She's written books and, sold books. And she also has new consulting opportunities, all because of her podcast, Redefining Wealth. At She Leads Media, we recently helped Dr. Bonnie Wims, host of her podcast called Therapy Deconstructed, to launch her very own podcast. And what drove her to get past the fear that she had of starting her podcast was the fact that she deeply knew that sharing her message about therapy and how it is something that can truly help you in your life, sharing that message could help people beyond what she was able to do in her private practice in New York City. So now Bonnie has a top 10% podcast on the She Leads podcast network, and she could not be more excited that she is reaching people that don't have the opportunity to come into her New York City practice. You can see that, or you can hear that the power of podcasting to elevate your brand and amplify your message cannot be overstated. And the best part is that you don't need a massive budget or a professional studio and expensive equipment to get started if you'd like to be a podcast host. You do need some guidance, however, along with a strategy, a plan, your voice, your story, your unique point of view, and a passion for what you do. So if you are ready to unleash your voice and propel your business forward, I highly encourage you to explore our Podcast in a Box service from She Leads Media. We take care of all of the technicalities. We work together with you on a strategy and a recording cadence so you can focus on what you do best, sharing your expertise and inspiring your audience. Before we wrap up, I wanted to leave you with this. Podcasting isn't just about business growth. It's about empowerment and amplifying women's voices in a world that sometimes tries to silence us. So let's take this opportunity to make our voices heard and pave the way for future generations of women entrepreneurs. Thank you so much for joining me today on the Sugar Coated Podcast. Remember, subscribe, leave a review, and please, if you can find it in your heart to share this episode with women entrepreneurs, I would greatly appreciate it. Until next time, keep shining, keep podcasting, and keep making a difference. See you soon. This is the She Leads Podcast Network.